The dust cloud rose on the horizon like a warning, but for Beatrice Zimmerman, it was a beacon of hope as the stagecoach rumbled toward Willow Creek, her last chance at a new beginning after her father's death had left her penniless in Chicago. The year was 1874, and the West was still wild enough to swallow a woman whole if she wasn't careful. But Beatrice had nothing left to lose back east. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the town's only hotel, a two-story wooden structure that had seen better days. Beatrice gathered her single trunk, straightened her travel-worn blue dress, and stepped down into the street, the late afternoon sun beating down mercilessly on her fair skin. "Miss, let me help you with that," came a deep voice from behind her. Beatrice turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His clothes were dusty, his hat pulled low, but there was something in the way he carried himself that spoke of confidence and capability. "Thank you, but I can manage," she replied, though her arms were already aching from the weight of the trunk. The stranger tipped his hat. "Preston Blackburn, at your service, madam. And I insist. No lady should be carrying her own luggage in this heat." Before she could protest further, he lifted the trunk with ease. "New in town. Is it that obvious?" Beatrice attempted a smile, though exhaustion pulled at her features. "Well, Willow Creek ain't exactly bustling with new faces. You got business here. I'm to start as the new schoolteacher next week." She brushed a strand of auburn hair from her face. "I arrived early to settle in." Preston's eyebrows rose slightly. "Schoolteacher, huh? Town's been waiting on one for months. Kids running wild as mustangs." They reached the hotel entrance, and Preston set her trunk down. "Well, Mississippi. Zimmerman. Beatrice Zimmerman. Miss Zimmerman, welcome to Willow Creek. If you need anything, I run the Doubleby Ranch just north of town." He tipped his hat again. "Maybe I'll see you around." Beatrice watched him walk away, his spurs jingling with each step. There was something about Preston Blackburn that intrigued her, though she quickly chided herself for such thoughts. She'd come west to build a new life, not to be distracted by handsome cowboys. The hotel room was small but clean. Beatrice unpacked her meager belongings and sat on the edge of the bed, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake coming to this dusty frontier town. Chicago had been cultured and civilized, despite its growing pains after the Great Fire. Willow Creek was, well, it was the opposite of everything she knew. Morning came with the sounds of a town waking up, horses whinnying, shopkeepers opening their doors, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Beatrice dressed carefully in one of her 3 good dresses and ventured out to explore her new home. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a single-room building that needed paint and attention. When Beatrice unlocked the door with the key the town council had sent her, she was greeted by dust, cobwebs, and disarray. Desks were overturned, books were scattered, and it appeared animals had made themselves at home in her absence. "Wonderful," she muttered to herself, picking up a tattered reader from the floor. "Not quite what you expected, is it?" Beatrice spun around to find Preston Blackburn leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest. "Mr. Blackburn, you startled me. Sorry about that. Saw you heading this way and thought I'd check in. Town council ain't exactly known for their thoroughness." He surveyed the room. "This is worse than I imagined." Beatrice sighed. "It's nothing some hard work won't fix." Preston stepped fully into the schoolhouse, rolling up his sleeves. "Then let's get to work, Miss Zimmerman." "Oh, I couldn't possibly impose. It ain't an imposition if I'm offering." His smile was warm and genuine. "Besides, some of my ranch hands' children will be attending your school. Consider it an investment." For the next several hours, they worked side by side, sweeping, scrubbing, rearranging furniture, and making lists of needed supplies. Beatrice found Preston easy to talk to, and she learned he'd come to Willow Creek 5 years earlier, building his ranch from nothing after serving in the war between the states. "What brought you out west, if you don't mind my asking?" Preston questioned as they took a break, sitting on the schoolhouse steps with cups of water. Beatrice hesitated. "My father died last winter. The debts he left behind took everything, including our home. I needed a fresh start." Preston nodded, understanding in his eyes. The West is good for fresh starts. Has a way of letting a person reinvent themselves. "Is that what you did?" A shadow crossed his face. "Something like that." He stood abruptly. "I should head back to the ranch. My foreman can only handle so much without me breathing down his neck." Before leaving, he turned to her. "There's a social at the church Saturday evening. Whole town will be there. Good way for you to meet folks before school starts. Thank you, Mr. Blackburn, for everything today." "Preston," he corrected. "And it was my pleasure, Miss Zimmerman." "Beatrice," she replied with a smile. Saturday evening came quickly, and Beatrice found herself more nervous than expected as she approached the church, music and laughter spilling from its open doors. She wore her best dress, a deep green that complemented her auburn hair and hazel eyes, and had spent extra time pinning her hair just so. The church was transformed, lanterns hung from every beam, tables laden with food lined the walls, and a small band played lively tunes in the corner. People of all ages filled the space, but conversations hushed momentarily when Beatrice entered. A woman in her 50s approached immediately. "You must be our new schoolteacher. I'm Martha Wilson, the mayor's wife." She took Beatrice's arm. "Come, let me introduce you to everyone." For the next hour, Beatrice shook hands and tried to remember names as Martha paraded her around. Everyone was welcoming, if a bit curious about the Eastern woman who'd come to teach their children. "She's pretty enough, but city folk don't usually last out here," Beatrice overheard someone say, and her resolve strengthened. She would prove them wrong. "Don't mind them," came a familiar voice, and Beatrice turned to find Preston behind her, looking handsome in clean clothes, his dark hair still damp from washing. "They said the same about me." "And did you prove them wrong?" she asked. "Still working on it." He grinned. "Dance with me." Before she could answer, he'd taken her hand and led her to where couples were dancing to a fiddle tune. His hand at her waist was warm and steady as he guided her through the steps. "You dance well for a cowboy," she remarked. "And you're full of surprises for a schoolteacher," he countered. "Most ladies from back east would be crying for home by now." "I'm not most ladies." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "No, you certainly are not." The music slowed, and their bodies drew closer. Beatrice was acutely aware of his presence, the subtle scent of soap and leather, the strength in his arms as he held her. "People are watching," she whispered. "Let them," Preston replied, his voice low. "Nothing wrong with a dance between friends." But as their eyes met and held, Beatrice knew friendship wasn't what made her heart race. And judging by the intensity in Preston's gaze, he felt it too, this unexpected connection that had sparked between them in just a few days. The weeks that followed were busy ones for Beatrice. School began with 17 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Some could barely read, while others showed remarkable aptitude despite their sporadic education. Beatrice threw herself into teaching, determined to make a difference in their lives. Preston kept his distance initially, but found reasons to ride into town more frequently than he had before. Sometimes he brought supplies for the school books, slates, even a new bell for the roof. Other times he simply stopped by at the end of the day to walk Beatrice to her boarding house, where she'd moved after leaving the hotel. Their conversations during these walks became the highlight of Beatrice's days. Preston told her about his dreams for his ranch, about the war that still haunted him sometimes, about losing his parents when he was young. In turn, Beatrice shared stories of Chicago, of her father's failed businesses and her mother's early death, of her love for teaching and literature. One warm evening in late September, they lingered by the creek that gave the town its name, watching the sunset paint the water gold. "You've surprised everyone, you know," Preston said, skipping a stone across the water's surface. "How so?" "Nobody expected the Eastern schoolteacher to last this long, let alone thrive. Parents can't stop talking about how their kids actually want to go to school now." Beatrice smiled, pleased. "And what about you, Preston? Have I surprised you too?" He turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. "Every day. You're nothing like I expected, Beatrice Zimmerman." "Is that good or bad?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, Preston stepped closer, his hand coming up to gently cup her cheek. Beatrice's breath caught as he leaned down, his intention clear. She closed her eyes as his lips met hers in a tender kiss that sent warmth spreading through her entire being. When they parted, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "Definitely good," he murmured. They began courting properly after that evening. Though Preston was careful to maintain propriety, a schoolteacher's reputation was everything in a small town. They attended church together on Sundays. He escorted her to the harvest festival, and sometimes he invited her to the ranch for dinner, always with his housekeeper present as chaperone. Beatrice fell more deeply in love with each passing day, not just with Preston, but with the life she was building in Willow Creek. Her students were making remarkable progress. The townspeople had accepted her as one of their own, and for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere. But happiness rarely comes without challenges, and their first test arrived with the early winter rains. The creek swelled beyond its banks, flooding the lower part of town, including the schoolhouse. Beatrice watched in despair as books and supplies she'd worked so hard to acquire were damaged beyond repair. "We'll rebuild," Preston assured her as they salvaged what they could. "Better than before." "With what money?" Beatrice countered, exhaustion making her voice sharp. "The town council barely had enough for my salary, let alone rebuilding." Preston's jaw tightened with determination. "Leave that to me." True to his word, Preston organized efforts to rebuild the schoolhouse. He contributed his own money, convinced other ranchers to donate, and worked alongside the town's men to construct a new building on higher ground. Beatrice watched in awe as her new schoolhouse took shape, larger and sturdier than the old one. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked him one evening as they stood surveying the nearly completed building. Preston took her hands in his. "Because it matters to you, and you matter to me." The schoolhouse was finished just after Christmas, and classes resumed in January. The new year brought clear, cold days and star-filled nights, perfect for sleigh rides and skating on the frozen pond north of town. During one such outing, Preston pulled Beatrice away from the crowd, leading her to a secluded spot beneath a snow-laden pine tree. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. "Preston, you've already given me too much." Her words died as he withdrew a small wooden box. Beatrice's heart began to race as he dropped to one knee in the snow before her. "Beatrice Zimmerman, I know you've only been in Willow Creek for half a year, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. You brought something to this town, to me, that I didn't even know was missing." He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Beatrice's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Preston, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to gather her in his arms, kissing her with all the love and promise of their future together. News of their engagement spread quickly through town. Most were delighted, though a few questioned the hasty courtship. Martha Wilson took it upon herself to organize an engagement party at the mayor's home, insisting the town's most eligible bachelor, and their beloved schoolteacher deserved a proper celebration. The party was in full swing when a latecomer arrived, a woman none had seen before, elegantly dressed despite travel dust, with striking features and a determined expression. She scanned the room until her gaze landed on Preston, and then she moved directly toward the engaged couple. "Preston Blackburn," she called, her voice carrying over the music. "Did you think I wouldn't find you?" The room fell silent as Preston turned, the color draining from his face. "Eliza," he breathed, "what are you doing here? Is that any way to greet your wife?" she demanded. Gasps and murmurs erupted around them. Beatrice felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "Wife?" she whispered, looking at Preston with betrayal in her eyes. "Former wife," Preston corrected quickly, his voice tight. "We were divorced 3 years ago, Eliza. I have the papers to prove it." Eliza laughed bitterly. "Those papers weren't legal and you know it. The judge was your friend, the witnesses were paid. Our marriage is still valid." Preston's expression hardened. "That's a lie. You're the one who wanted the divorce. You're the one who left. And now I've returned." Eliza's gaze flicked to Beatrice, taking in her pale face and the diamond ring glinting on her finger. "Oh dear, has he proposed to you? How dreadfully awkward." Beatrice pulled away from Preston, her mind reeling. "I need air," she managed to say before pushing through the crowd toward the door. Preston called after her, but Martha Wilson blocked his path. "Let her go, Preston. She needs time." Outside in the cold night air, Beatrice tried to make sense of what had just happened. A wife? Preston had never mentioned being married before. What else hadn't he told her? She heard footsteps crunching in the snow behind her but didn't turn. "Beatrice, please, let me explain," Preston pleaded. "Explain what? That you're married? That everything between us has been." She couldn't finish the sentence. "No," he said firmly, moving to face her. "Eliza and I were married briefly years ago, before I came to Willow Creek. The divorce was legal, I swear it. She's lying. Why would she lie? Why would she come all this way?" Preston's expression darkened. "Money. It's always been about money with Eliza. She must have heard about the ranch's success." Beatrice wanted to believe him, but doubt had taken root. "You never mentioned her. Not once in all our conversations. Because that part of my life was over. It was painful, Beatrice. She left me for another man during the war, then divorced me when I returned wounded and with no prospects. I didn't want those memories to taint what we have. And what do we have, Preston?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Something built on half-truths? We have love," he insisted, reaching for her, but Beatrice stepped back. "I need time to think. Please just give me that." The next morning, legal documents appeared at Beatrice's boarding house door. Preston's divorce papers, yellowed with age but clearly legal, bearing official seals and signatures. Accompanying them was a note from the town's lawyer confirming their validity. Still, Beatrice's trust had been shaken. When Preston came to see her that evening, she returned his ring. "I can't do this, Preston. Not with these doubts. Beatrice, please. It's not just about Eliza or the divorce. It's that you kept something so significant from me. What else don't I know about you?" Preston's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Nothing that matters. Nothing that changes how I feel about you." "It matters to me," Beatrice said softly. "I came west for a fresh start, for honesty and clarity in my life. I can't begin a marriage with secrets between us." February brought bitter cold and heavy snow that isolated Willow Creek for weeks. Beatrice threw herself into teaching, expanding the curriculum to include more advanced subjects for her older students. Preston withdrew to his ranch, appearing in town only when necessary, his face haggard and his eyes hollow. Eliza remained in Willow Creek, taking a room at the hotel and becoming a topic of gossip. She told anyone who would listen about Preston's cruelty during their marriage, about how he'd abandoned her. But her stories were inconsistent, and as weeks passed, the townspeople began to see through her charade. One evening in early March, as Beatrice was grading papers in her quarters, a frantic knocking came at her door. It was Martha Wilson, her face grave. "It's Preston," she said without preamble. "There's been an accident at the ranch. His foreman just rode in for the doctor." Beatrice's heart seized. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough. A beam collapsed in the barn during repairs. He's pinned and injured." Without hesitation, Beatrice grabbed her coat. "I need a horse. The doctor's already gone ahead. I need to be there," Beatrice insisted, her earlier doubts forgotten in the face of Preston's peril. Martha nodded understanding. "My husband's saddling a horse for you now." The ride to the Doubleby Ranch was the longest of Beatrice's life, her mind conjuring terrifying images with each hoofbeat. When she finally arrived, ranch hands directed her to the barn, where the doctor was emerging, wiping blood from his hands. "How is he?" Beatrice demanded. "Stable for now," the doctor replied. "Broken leg, cracked ribs, lost some blood. But he's tough. With proper care, he should recover." Beatrice pushed past him into the barn. Preston lay on a makeshift bed of blankets, his face ashen but his eyes clear. Those eyes widened when he saw her. "Beatrice," he croaked. She knelt beside him, taking his hand. "I came as soon as I heard. You shouldn't have. It's not safe riding alone at night." Even injured, he was concerned for her safety. Tears filled Beatrice's eyes as weeks of hurt and doubt melted away in the face of almost losing him. "Don't you ever scare me like that again, Preston Blackburn," she whispered fiercely. Preston told her everything about his marriage to Eliza, how young and foolish they'd been, how quickly it had soured, how the war had given Eliza the opportunity to leave. Beatrice shared her own fears and insecurities, her grief over her father's death, her uncertainty about her place in the world. "I was afraid," Preston admitted one afternoon as they sat on the ranch house porch, the spring sun warm on their faces. "Afraid if you knew everything about my past, you wouldn't want me." "And I was afraid of being hurt again," Beatrice replied. "After losing everything in Chicago, I couldn't bear the thought of building a life on unstable ground." Preston took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "This ground is solid, Beatrice. I promise you that." Meanwhile, Eliza's true nature had been revealed to the town when she was caught trying to forge Preston's signature on bank documents. Faced with arrest, she confessed to her schemes and left Willow Creek in disgrace. As Preston's strength returned, so did Beatrice's certainty about their future together. On a perfect day in May, with wildflowers covering the prairie in a riot of color, they stood before the preacher in Willow Creek's church, surrounded by friends who had become family. "I do," Beatrice said clearly. Her heart full as Preston slipped a gold band onto her finger to join her restored engagement ring. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared, and Preston gathered Beatrice in his arms for a kiss that promised forever. Their wedding celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing and feasting under stars that seemed to shine especially bright. When they finally found a moment alone, Preston led Beatrice to the creek's edge, the same spot where he'd first kissed her. "Mrs. Blackburn," he said softly, drawing her close, "has a nice ring to it." Beatrice smiled up at him. "It does, doesn't it? Though the children at school might need time to adjust to their teacher's new name. They'll have time. We all will." His expression turned serious. "Beatrice, I know these past months haven't been easy, but I want you to know that what we have, this love, this life we're building, it's the most real thing I've ever known." Something in his tone made her heart skip. "What do you mean?" Preston shook his head slightly. Sometimes it feels like a dream, having you here, being your husband. Like it's too good to be true. The cowboy said, "This ain't real." Beatrice quoted with a teasing smile, then grew serious as she placed a hand on his cheek. She said, "Then why does it feel like forever?" Preston covered her hand with his own. "Because it is forever, Beatrice. You and me, this ranch, our future children running through these fields, it's all real, and it's all ours." In the years that followed, Beatrice and Preston built that future together. The Doubleby Ranch prospered, and Beatrice continued teaching until their first child was born, a daughter with her mother's auburn hair and her father's storm-gray eyes. 2 sons followed, filling their home with laughter and energy. The schoolhouse that Preston had rebuilt became too small for Willow Creek's growing population, and a proper school was constructed in town. Beatrice served on the school board, ensuring education remained a priority as the frontier town grew into a thriving community. Through droughts and blizzards, through boom years and lean ones, through joy and sorrow, their love remained constant, a beacon in the Wild West, as real and enduring as the land itself. On their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by grown children, friends, and former students, Preston took Beatrice's hand and led her in a dance, just as he had at that long-ago social where they'd first held each other. "Still think this is too good to be true?" Beatrice asked, her hazel eyes still bright despite the silver threading through her hair. Preston's laugh lines deepened as he smiled. "Not anymore. This is as real as it gets, my love, and I wouldn't change a moment of it." As they danced beneath the same stars that had witnessed their journey, Beatrice knew with absolute certainty that what they'd found in each other was both rare and precious, a love that had transformed forever from a mere word into a living, breathing reality that would endure long after they were gone, as eternal as the western sky above them.